You can't always trust those who are closest to you. This is something that local pastor Terry Caffey learned after a home invasion left nearly his entire family murdered in cold blood. Be sure to listen to the end of this episode to learn the twist at the end of this horrific nightmare that would rock Terry to the very core of his being and would make him question the very definition of the term family. Alright, let's start from the beginning, shall we? Erin Caffey was just 16 years old in 2008 and lived in Emory, Texas with her entire family, her mother and father, Terry and Penny, and her two brothers, Tyler and Matthew. Her father, Terry, was a pastor, and the family completely lived to serve their church. They all played instruments, and Erin especially was such a fantastic singer, and she would sing in the church choir. In fact, Erin was such a fantastic singer that many that have attended the church would say that when she sang solos, they were so taken aback, and the solos were so beautiful that even Erin and some of the audience members would be moved to tears because her singing was just so passionate and so beautiful. When Erin was 16 years old, she got a part-time job working at Sonic. Shout out to Sonic. My boyfriend used to work at Sonic. He said that was his first job. I was more of a Baja Fresh girl. Yeah, you know. 18-year-old Charlie Wilkinson also worked at the Sonic at that time as one of the chefs, and the two started flirting and quickly hit it off, and they got serious pretty quickly. However, her parents were not uber excited at the prospect of their Christian daughter dating an older man. Her father always had reservations about this man who seemed to give off a bad boy attitude, and also, he was a little bit older than her. He was 18 and she was merely 16 at the time, and he had a feeling that the prospect of sex would likely come up sooner or later. And he was worried that his daughter Erin, who was already going through somewhat of a rebellious teenager stage, may or may not be a little more susceptible to getting into mischievous acts. And in fact, what father wouldn't be a little worried about his precious daughter getting mixed up with the wrong crowd? But he saw that she was happy, so he tried to go along with it. However, Erin's parents' initial reservations about her new boyfriend Charlie would turn into full-on uncertainty after they would invite him over for dinner and to the house on several occasions just to start to get to know the family. When Terry arrived home from work one night and he opened the door to his own home, the first thing he saw when he entered his house was Charlie sitting in his recliner chair. And so, at first, Terry thought, that's strange. Why would this man be sitting in my chair? Because this chair, it wasn't just a normal recliner chair. It looked like the man of the house's chair. It was big, it was electric, it had a big seat divot in it, so it looked like someone had been sitting there for a long time. That was Terry's chair. And Terry knows that if he walked into another man's house, he would not be the first one to sit in a chair like that. And that really struck a nerve with him because he knew in anyone else's home that would be stepping over some boundaries. And so when he approached Charlie to go and shake his hand and introduce himself, he walked up to him and he said, "You must be Charlie," to which Charlie responded to Terry, "And you are?" And immediately, Terry knew in his mind that that was a double strike right there, and that told him almost everything that he needed to know about Charlie. But Terry gave the boy the chance and assumed that he just hadn't been raised with proper manners. But this immediately already gives us an indication of Charlie's antisocial traits and the disregard he clearly has for other people's emotions and the lack of respect that he has for others. Charlie would continue to come over to the Caffey's house on a regular basis. He would even attend church with them on the weekends. And what originally seemed to be random outbursts of rebellious behavior in terms of their daughter seemed to slowly trickle into characteristics and behavior that would happen on a normal basis with her. It seemed that Erin was becoming more distant with the family, with her and Charlie often secluding themselves and being in their own little world. It's even said that at church on the weekends with the entire family and with other churchgoers all around them, that the pair would often be a little too overly affectionate and they would be putting on a little too much public displays of affection for comfort, with other churchgoers often feeling uncomfortable or even disgusted with some of the displays that they were seeing. Since things were getting noticeably worse, Erin's parents started to enlist some house rules on the teens. The pair could not be alone in the house unless the parent was there, and Charlie had to leave the house by 9 p.m. on school nights. However, the two got so serious in the relationship and they were so madly in love that they just could not be separated, and they would do anything so that they could always be together. Charlie was so infatuated with Erin that he even gave her a promise ring that had originally been his grandmother's. So he gave her the promise ring and said, "Baby girl, you're gonna be mine for the rest of my life." So you could say that things were heating up and they were getting pretty serious. However, through the entire ordeal, Terry was quoted as saying that something just didn't feel right about Charlie, and that there was something that just didn't sit right with him. It was always just a gut feeling. However, Terry's gut feeling would be correct in the end. And throughout all of this, Erin's parents contended that they always thought that their daughter was always just the ideal daughter. She was mild-mannered, she wasn't too rebellious or anything like that, so they always just thought that all of this was happening because Charlie was around. And it wasn't until then that they really started to see a change in her behavior, which honestly isn't too strange considering the malleability of teenagers, especially when they're at the age that having a boyfriend is just the top priority. Hey, we've all been there. We've been there, done that. I've been in middle school, you've been in high school, where having a boyfriend or a girlfriend and texting them all night long, it just seems to be the most important thing since sliced bread, you know? So we can't really knock the girl, in my opinion. However, Terry and Penny were growing more and more concerned by the day, but it wasn't until they noticed that Erin's grades were starting to slip that they thought that they had to do just a little bit more to take matters into their own hands. And so they decided to do a little bit deeper digging on this man, Charlie, that Erin called her boyfriend. And what they found would shake them to their core and sealed the deal for them that this relationship absolutely needed to end. So they went on Charlie Wilkinson's MySpace page. And back in the day, the young folk, we used MySpace. There was no Instagram, Facebook wasn't really a thing yet. We used the space. And as they kept scrolling through more and more on the MySpace profile, they started seeing verbiage about drinking, doing drugs, and partying. And that definitely caused concern for them because they were all underage. No one was 21 years old. You know, those types of shenanigans and shenanigans. But a comment that would send an absolute shiver down both of their spines was a comment made by one of his friends that said that him and Erin, and they used Erin's name explicitly, should come over to the friend's house that weekend where they will drink, do some drugs, and all have sex together. And naturally, that sent her parents into a panic. They were like, "Oh, hell no. This is not happening with my daughter. I'm a pastor. She is a good Christian girl. This guy's got to get out of here because Erin is getting involved with some bad people." And to be honest, they did the right thing. They tried giving her some space after a while, as long as it wasn't interfering with her normal life. They gave it some time, and obviously, in the end of the day, it was impacting her, and she was just getting into some risky business, so they were ready to draw the line. Finally, in February of 2008, Erin broke her, quote, phone curfew, and her parents insisted that Erin end the relationship. To their surprise, Erin was very receptive to her parents' suggestion, and she told Terry that she had been wanting to break up with Charlie, but just didn't know how to. So they told her, "Listen, everything's gonna be okay. We're here for you. All you need to do is just call him, say that you don't want to date anymore, and then it will be okay. You don't owe him a reason, just break it off, and we'll help you with the rest." So they all went to bed, and then the very next morning, Erin told her parents that the deed had been done. She broke up with Charlie last night, and they were like, "Thank God." And the next few days are what Terry described as being just like a dream come true, where the house had experienced some tension and just felt not fun, not lighthearted for several months, all while Erin was dating this man. Holy sheep shit, that's scary. I don't know about you guys, but anytime something happens on its own and it's just a natural occurrence, do you just assume it's ghosts? That felt like a ghostly thing to me. Okay. I need to stop watching scary movies because my boyfriend and I will watch scary ass movies and then I'll be totally freaked out. Like, I'll hear a noise and I'll be like, and then it'll be like something that fell or the house will creak. And then my boyfriend's like, "It's literally just the house creaking." And I'm like, "No, it's a murder inside the home." Okay, I digress. So the next days just seemed like a dream come true for the family because everything was getting back to normal. Erin was acting like her normal self, just like their cheery, young, daughter that just was happy about life, and they were just elated. And so that Friday evening, the entire family, so Terry, Penny, Matthew, Tyler, and Erin, were just enjoying a movie night together. They were all sitting on the couch in the living room, and then Tyler and Matthew, her younger brothers, started just roughhousing a little bit. They started just getting into like a little bit of a play fight. And so Terry chimes in and is like, all right, you kids, you're getting a little crazy. So he grabs a pillow and then he kind of gives them a playful little whack with the pillow. And then a full-on pillow fight ensues. It's between Matthew, Terry. Everyone's just kind of whacking each other with pillows. It was just a good, organic, fun little fight that they were having. And Terry even said that Erin chimed in. Erin got in the mix and was hitting her brothers with the couch pillows as well. And it was just some organic, natural fun. And so the family finished up the movie that they were watching and they were all off to bed. At around midnight, Terry was awakened by what sounded like their dog was barking for several minutes, which wasn't too strange. It was an outdoor dog. They had lots of land. He had a nice little dog house. He didn't have to sleep outside, but he was barking at something. So he was like, you know what? I'll give it 5 minutes. If he doesn't stop barking, I'll go ahead and check things out just to make sure he's okay or that there's not a coyote on site, what have you. And then after about 2 or 3 minutes, the dog actually stopped barking, so he thought nothing of it and he went back to sleep. Several minutes later, Terry was awakened by these gunshot sounds and they were coming from within his room. He wasn't sure what was happening just yet. And as he lifted his arm to shield himself, he was hit with a bullet in his arm, his shoulder, his neck, and then one eventually what hit his face. And as one of the blasts hit him in the face, the pressure from the blast actually knocked him right out of bed into the darkness on the cold floor. And then as he was trying to gather his composure and just figure out what's been hitting him and what's going on, he starts to feel wetness all over his face. And it takes him a minute to realize, but he starts to notice that that's blood, his blood trickling all down his face. And then parts of his body, including the right side of his whole body, his arm, his jaw, things are starting to go numb. And he's thinking to himself, is this a nightmare? Is this an earthquake? Like, what's going on? And as he opens his eyes in the darkness, he sees a shadowy figure, and he sees their face. He sees the silhouette of their face. But there's so much just going on and his body is going into shock. He doesn't put it together yet. He doesn't know this face. He just doesn't recognize it yet. And so at this point, Terry has been shot 11 times by a .22 caliber rifle, and he was just struggling to stay awake and was already drifting in and out of consciousness. And as he stared into the darkness, he sees a man in their room and doesn't immediately recognize him. There's also a second gunman working as an accomplice too, but his thoughts are just going all over the place. He doesn't recognize either of them just yet. And it was at this moment that he sort of had a moment of clarity and he thought, oh my God, all of my children are sleeping upstairs. I have to go get them and save them. And so as he's laying face down on the ground, floating in and out of consciousness, trying to lay still, trying to be quiet. And so the footsteps get closer to him so much that the perpetrator, actually kicks his foot to see if he's moving or not. And so Terry just lays completely still. And all he can hear is this heavy breathing of someone that just kicked his foot and is standing right over him, is just breathing heavily. And then he hears them cock the gun barrel. So Terry is just sitting there, just praying to God, saying, please God, just make it quick, because he knows that this person is about to shoot him in the back of the head and just end it all and then move on to his children upstairs. But the bullet would never come. Instead, the man stood there for a few minutes, just continuing this heavy breathing, and left him there. And as he left him there, he was just thinking, wow, like what happened? But they thought he was dead. And so in between the gunshots, Terry had seen the gunman's face, but it all happened so fast that he just didn't know who it was. But that didn't matter right now because he knew he had to get his family out of the house. As he lay on the floor, just trying to get up and trying to get on his feet, due to the amount of blood that he had lost, he had no energy at all, and he was still fading in and out of consciousness, but he was doing his best just to get on his feet so he could walk upstairs to try and save his children. And at that moment, he hears his oldest son, Matthew, scream, "No, Charlie, no, why are you doing this, Charlie?" And at that moment, it clicks. Charlie. This is Charlie that's doing this to us. Erin's ex-boyfriend, Charlie. That's the face that he had seen in the darkness, and it all clicked. He knew exactly who the gunman was. But then at that moment, he heard 2 extra gunshots, and he knew that Matthew had been shot. Terry had never seen the accomplice before. However, the accomplice was one of Charlie's friends, Charles Wade, whom Erin had actually met a couple times before. And so right as he heard Matthew crying out, he heard gun blasts go out again, and he knew that Matthew had been shot. And as Terry was trying to stumble to his feet to go up and try and do something, he collapsed and lost consciousness. Matthew had been shot dead in the face inside his bedroom. And as all this was happening, a terrified Tyler, who was only a young 8 years old at the time, was horrified and ran to the closet to seek shelter and hide, because he knew if these 2 gunmen had found him, he would be next. Unfortunately, the 2 gunmen would find Tyler hiding inside the closet, and they would stab him to death with swords, full-length swords, like samurai swords that they had brought to the house so that they could help slay the family with these. Unfortunately, Penny, Terry's wife, would also meet her demise by the sword, with the pair nearly decapitating her with both of their swords when Charles Wade's gun would jam. They both took their swords and stabbed her in the neck. Once Charles Wilkinson and Charlie Wade knew that they had slayed the entire family in cold blood, they set the house ablaze. Terry had been unconscious for several minutes. However, he came to when he started to smell smoke seeping into his bedroom. He looked around the room to see if he can try and find Penny and what was going on with Penny. However, he saw her laying on the floor, and he knew right away it was too late. It was a horrific scene. Blood was everywhere. It was pooled around his wife, with her head nearly decapitated. And he knew that he didn't even need to check a pulse. What they had done to Penny was horrific, and it was too late for her. He stumbled into the hallway and was met with flames engulfing his walls and smoke filling the hallway. With his kids in mind, he tried heading through their bathroom, which had a connecting door to a different area of the house. And as he was heading that way, the ceiling started to cave in, and he could hear windows starting to burst and shatter due to the enormous pressure of the home coming down. And so the entire house is completely filled with smoke now, and he can't see anything. He can't even see a hand in front of his face. And Terry, now panicking, realizes that he can't save his children if he's dead. He knows that the smoke is filling the house quickly, so he needs to get out of the house as soon as possible to preserve his life so he can help save his family from this massive fire that's happening, that's destroying their home. And so he's feeling around the bathroom that he's in, trying to find a window, because he knows that there's a window that leads directly outside. So he's feeling around, he's tapping, he's blind, and he feels the window. And so he tries pushing it up, but it's not opening. The immense pressure of the house burning and starting to sink and collapse on it is making it so that the window won't open. And so he takes his last ounce of energy and starts banging and pounding on the window, just in an attempt to get the window open or to burst or anything. And finally, he's losing his energy. He's almost about to give up. He gives the window one last big push, and the window opens, and he knows he's got it. And he hurls himself out this window. And as he gets that first breath of air, it's just so refreshing, and it just goes, he gets that first breath of air, but immediately he knows he has to get himself out of this window. So he falls. He just fumbles out the window, and he falls 5 feet to the ground. It was a substantial drop. And once he hits the ground, he lands on his back, and it just knocks the air right out of him. It was just such a solid thud on the ground, and he had fallen so far, but he was okay. It just took the wind out of him. But he was outside of the house, and so he starts crawling away from the house, and he looks back, and the house is just collapsing. The entire house is on fire, and he knew that his family was still in there. And he knows his neighbors live at least 400 yards away. And finally, as he was crawling through brush and bushes, getting cuts and everything, he finally makes it to his neighbor's porch, where he just collapses. And he's just using anything that he can. He's using his fist, his feet, anything to knock on his neighbor's door so that he can make some noise so they would wake up and come out and find him. And so he's knocking and knocking and knocking. It's late at night, so literally it's in the middle of the night. So his neighbors are probably sleeping. He needs to wake them up. And then finally, after several seconds of just bashing and flailing about, his neighbor finally wakes up. He turns on the porch light and he comes out. And right away, Terry knew that he was about to die. He had lost a lot of blood. He had been shot 11 times and just escaped a fire. So he had breathed in all of the fumes and everything. And the first thing he says is, "Charlie Wilkinson killed my family. Charlie, you need to find Charlie." And he's telling everything to the neighbor because he knows that if he dies, the neighbor needs to know who did this. And so immediately his neighbor calls the police, and here is the 911 call from that moment.
Is he conscious?
Yes.
And is he breathing?
Yes.
Okay. Sir?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. When did this happen?
I don't know, just a little bit ago, and we've also got a house on fire out here.
And the house is on fire? Is the assailant still nearby?
Are they?
Is the person who shot him still nearby, sir?
Yes, he's right here at me.
You shot him?
No, I didn't. I don't know any more details. I've got to hang up and help him.
Sir, I have to ask you these questions. Okay, they're en route. Is there any serious bleeding?
Yes, he's bleeding.
Okay, is he completely awake?
Yes, he's awake.
Okay, what part of the body was injured?
I don't know, but I've got to go.
Sir, I need to know where he was shot.
Do what?
I need to know where he was shot at.
I don't know.
And so Terry is whisked away to the trauma center at the hospital, and he undergoes quick surgery to seal up his wounds, and they undergo surgery for a couple hours, and then they think that they have him stabilized. It's obviously a little early to tell if he'll succumb to his wounds, but they have him stabilized and they think he's gonna make it. So he's in his room, he's healing, he's hooked up to all the monitors, and his sister comes to his side and she tells Terry, "Hey, look, Erin is alive. Erin made it. They found her and she's fine." Well, his sister looks at him and tells him that there's something that she also needs to tell him. The nurses and the police told her that she shouldn't tell him because of his condition, but Terry is like, what? Like, please tell me what you have to say. If it's about my family, I need to know. And so she looks at him with just very caring eyes, and she's talking very softly to him. And she says, "Listen, Terry, they have Erin. Erin is just fine. She isn't in the hospital. She's actually in custody. And she's in custody because they think that she was involved in all of this." It would turn out that while everyone was sleeping that night, Erin had actually snuck out of the house and went to wait in a getaway car that was just down the road. And she was waiting in the car with Charles Wade's girlfriend. So it wasn't long after Terry had named Charlie Wilkinson as the gunman that the police tracked him down. It was a rural area in Texas, so there was only so many people around. Charlie was actually friends with Chief Deputy Kurt Fisher's son, so the chief deputy knew what he looked like and who he had hung out with. So they knew their guy, and they were going after him. They drove by his friend Charles Wade's house and saw Charlie's car parked there. When police arrived, Charles' brother Matthew Wade answered and let the police in. He said that he hadn't seen Charles or Charlie recently, so he wasn't sure if they were off drinking or partying, or if they had snuck in while he was sleeping. So he let the police walk around in the trailer home. So police enter the house and they start looking around for anything unusual. And most importantly, where is Charlie Wilkinson? Well, as they walk through the trailer home, which isn't very big to begin with, there is a door and it has a blanket taped over the front of it as a means like possibly to hide something. So they pull down the blanket and they walk inside, and there is Charlie sleeping on a mattress with no blanket with a gun right next to him. So they wake Charlie up and they're like, "Hey, we got some questions that we need to ask you outside. Why don't you come outside and talk to us a little bit?" And Charlie was like, I have no clue what you're talking about. What, her family's dead? No, I don't know. No, we broke up. I was out drinking with Charles and we came back here and crashed. So Charlie was acting totally oblivious to the whole situation. He was adamant that he had no involvement with any of the murders or burning the house down. Naturally, the police weren't buying it, however, so they told Charlie, listen, we have to take you in for a little bit more questioning. Please come with us to the station and we'll talk about it. And while they were telling all of this to Charlie, the police officer looked around the room, just scanning and letting his eyes wander, and they noticed what appeared to be blood splatter on some of the clothing nearby. I mean, the room was trashed. He had mountains of laundry, there was trash strewn about, so it was a little cluttered, but he saw some blood specks, which made him very curious, and it definitely made him want to return to this scene. They obtained a search warrant to search the Wades' trailer home, and the police started investigating the room that Charlie had been sleeping in. While they were searching, they found Erin's driver's license, and as they continued searching through the messy room that had piles of junk strewn all about, they saw some blonde hair sticking out of a pile of clothes. They grabbed at it, thinking that maybe it was a doll or a brush or something. And to their shock and surprise, it was Erin. They pulled on the hair and they pulled out a girl. She had been hiding under a pile of clothing in the corner of the bedroom. And once they realized it was her, he said, "Put your hands up right now." And Erin immediately just acted so shocked and confused, like she had just woken up. And as the police officer was talking to her, he was like, "Tell me everything you know. Where are you right now? What do you remember? Anything?" And Erin just didn't say anything at all. And as he kept probing and asking her questions, she finally came out saying, "I have no clue where I am right now. Whose house am I at? I remember these two men broke into our home and they forced me to drink something. I remember smoke and flames, but then it all went black." However, back at the station, Charlie Wilkinson, Erin's ex-boyfriend, was pretty willing to discuss everything that went down that night, without naming his accomplice, Charlie Wade. But what police originally assumed was an attack fueled by revenge due to Erin breaking up with him was actually an act of love, because Erin had actually asked Charlie to kill her entire family. According to him, she had told him that she absolutely hated her family. She despised them, and that the only way for them to be together was if he helped her kill her entire family. And it's curious to think, like, okay, where did this all spawn out of? How did she go from cheery church daughter to dating a bad boy to now wanting to jump all the way to murdering her entire family? Usually, I feel like there's a string of events that leads up to that. Well, a month prior to that, Erin's best friends and some friends at school would actually say that she was discussing how she wanted to murder her entire family. However, her friends had known that she was going through sort of like a rebellious stage. They had known that her parents didn't approve of her boyfriend, and so they thought that it was just sort of her chalking up a big game, talking about how rebellious she was and how she was going to kill her family, and they just didn't think too much of it, so no one ever reported anything. I had to take a little break because my camera battery was exhausted. It was exhausted from doing nothing, literally nothing but recording like it's supposed to do. And I came back from my little recess, and now this light's here. Damn. God, is that you? I'm gonna avoid the sunlight at all costs. So if you see me doing a little accounts differ as to who exactly was the mastermind behind the plan and who is exactly to blame for this entire situation. Was Erin maliciously pulled into a rebellious state and was driven to making the brash decision because she was under Charlie's influence? Or was she evil from the start and Charlie was just a love-struck pawn in her evil plot to kill her family and was willing to do anything to make her happy? So it took several hours of interrogation for Charlie Wilkinson to finally give up his accomplice, Charles Wade. During the interrogations, Charlie had mentioned that there was an unbreakable bond that he had shared with Charles Wade. Well, at first he didn't name Charles, but he had shared that there was an unbreakable bond that he had with this accomplice, and he just did not want to get him in trouble because it was like a loyalty thing. But eventually he did come clean, and he did give them up as accomplices. And it's interesting to see his loyalty with Wade, right? He felt no remorse and did not mind slaughtering an entire family, which would indicate that he has no empathy and has no feeling or regard for human life. However, when it came to his accomplice, Charles Wade, and the people that were involved in this crime, he felt a sense of loyalty and like he needed to protect them, which would indicate that he actually did have some loyalty or some empathy or feelings that normal human beings experience. It didn't take long for Erin Caffey's kidnapping story to start to crumble, just like her home had. Wilkinson and Wade both told police the same exact story, that the murders were all her idea. But Erin insisted that she had nothing to do with the murder of her family. This was all Charlie's idea, and she had been forced to leave the house that one night and sit in the car, which we may never know the full truth of this. And again, it's very interesting and important to analyze the disparity between the two. On one hand, Charlie and Charles had such a close bond and a brand of loyalty that even during the testimony, they both told the same exact story, that Erin was cold and cunning and calculating with this entire resolve, that it was her idea to slaughter this entire family. On the other hand, we have Erin, who is saying that she was not one to plan this entire thing, that it was Charlie and Charles who both devised this plan. Terry obviously wanted answers. I mean, his entire family was dead, his daughter's in jail, and so he went to Charles Wade's. He visited him in jail because he just wanted some answers naturally, and so he asked Charles Wade, like, what the heck happened? Why would you go along with something like this? Like, just something so horrible. You don't have a crazy criminal record, like why would you go along with something like this? And so Charles Wade told him that he needed money to pay an attorney so he can get full custody of his children. And to that, Terry was like, you slaughtered an entire family. You killed 2 innocent little kids to get full custody of your kid? Don't you see how ridiculous that is? And Terry looked him in the eye and he was like, you will have to live with this for the rest of your life. You're going to be in prison for the rest of your life. You're not going to see your kid ever, not in a million years. So it was just so, he was so dumbfounded by just the idiocracy of everything that had happened and how his family was just gone like that. It was just crazy, and he wanted answers. And Terry felt like he knew his daughter and did not think that she was this murderous villain that this story was making her out to be. He had raised her, and everything, according to him, seemed to be going fine until this Charlie guy showed up. And he so desperately wanted to talk to his daughter shortly after the incident, but the attorneys wouldn't let him talk to her until the final trial took place. Likely because of evidence, they needed the trial to happen first, and her attorneys wanted to make sure that her dad wasn't trying to fish any incriminating evidence out of her. So before he could even talk to his daughter, he had to wait until the trial was all the way over. So Charlie Wilkinson, Erin's ex-boyfriend, would testify that the entire idea was all Erin's, and that he was just a pawn in her malicious little game. He even said that he had suggested to Erin that they should just run off. They don't have to do something like this. Why don't we just run away together, and then you'll be away from your parents, and then we don't have to worry about it. We'll just be together. However, he said that Erin said that that was not good enough. She wanted her entire family dead. She didn't like her parents who were doing all these crazy rules on her. And she said that her 2 brothers were annoying and that they picked on her. So she said that she was ready for them all just to be gone and that this was the only way that they could be together. However, in the end, all of those who were involved were committed on 3 counts of capital murder. Charlie and Charles were both given life sentences without the possibility of parole, and Erin was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 25 years for the slaughter of her entire family. It's always interesting. I never know how these sentences go out because it'll always be like 4 life sentences plus 25 years. Terry Caffey, through everything that has happened, has actually stayed by his daughter's side and believes her side of the story. Terry has admitted that he doesn't think that his daughter is perfect. He admits that he knows that she has made mistakes, but at the end of the day, that's his daughter, and he feels like she was the easiest one for him to forgive. After the trial, after everything was said and done, Terry was hit really hard, and the disparity finally hit him that his entire family was gone, and the last living family member that he had was rotting away in prison for the rest of her life. It set him into a melancholy spiral, and he stayed that way for 4 months, and it got so bad that he decided to buy an RV, and he drove it and parked it on the plot of land where his home used to be, the one that had burned down, and it was where he raised his family. It was where his family was murdered and taken away from him, and he was prescribed lots of pills to help with the pain. And so essentially he just drowned himself in these pills for 4 whole months. He didn't leave the RV. He slept for 12 hours at a time, just trying to do anything to mask this pain and to numb it so he didn't have to feel this horrific pain that he was feeling for so long. However, after 4 months, he realized that this was no way to live and that it wasn't helping anyone. It wasn't helping Erin. It wasn't helping bring anyone else back. So he decided he needed to go out and do some good. It was a heinous, horrific situation, but he knew that the only way that he would be able to find some solace with himself is if he could somehow help other people and somehow turn this horrific incident into something that was slightly resembling something of good. And a lot of people have approached Terry and said to him, and he reads it online, he reads it everywhere. Many people have asked him, how can you forgive your daughter? How can you even look at her? And, you're naive for thinking that she's good. She's pure evil. But at the end of the day, Terry knows that Erin is his daughter. He raised her. He has so much unconditional love for his daughter. No matter what, a father has an unconditional love for his family. And that's what Terry feels for Erin. She did a horrific thing. She took everything from him. But at the end of the day, he loves her and he forgives her. Thank you so much for joining me on the Mature Audiences Only show. I had so much fun talking about these. Well, not so much fun, but I thoroughly enjoyed teaching you about these spooky and heinous stories that we talk about. If you feel like you enjoyed today's episode and that you enjoy this type of content, be sure to hit the subscribe button and be sure to give the like button a big old smack to the face just to let them know and how much you just care about their well-being. Be sure to tune in every single week where I'll be uploading videos to this platform. Also, if you enjoyed this type of content, be sure to subscribe to the Mature Audiences Only podcast, where I discuss even more crime content on a weekly basis. So be sure to subscribe to that as well. We're available on all of your favorite podcast platforms, such as Spotify, iTunes, Google, Amazon, what have you. In addition to that, if you're ever curious about any of the equipment that I use, I'll be sure to link them all in the show notes down below. So if you're curious about my microphone, my camera, any of my setup, I'll be sure to link it down below. So if you ever want to start your own show, you know what type of equipment works well for others and that I personally really enjoy. Anywho, folks, thank you so much for your time. We'll discuss things soon again. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Until we meet again, bye-bye.